Welcome to Nocturnal Clarity, where we explore the ever-evolving art of becoming who you are. Welcome to our series, Architects of the Soul. Today we examine our second proponent, Carl Gustav Jung, and the unsettling journey into the human shadow. You've probably already heard a lot of Carl Jung, but today I want to present to you the lesser-known facts, the hidden secrets of his life, and a far deeper psychological analysis of his concepts. We will also stray a bit from the path. In the bleak winter of 1913, one of the most brilliant minds in European psychiatry intentionally allowed himself to lose his footing on reality. He sat in his quiet, dimly lit study room in Kusnacht, Switzerland, closed his eyes, and opened the floodgates to his own subconscious mind. He was assaulted by apocalyptic visions, ancient mythological entities, and voices from the dark. For decades, the mainstream academic world believed Carl Jung was just a man of clean, respectable clinical theories. But hidden away from the public eye was an artifact that his family kept locked in a dark Swiss bank vault for over 50 years. In this video, we step into the restricted records of deep psychology, explore the enigma of the Red Book, and discover why our greatest strength is hidden in the most neglected, castaway corner of our soul. The Forbidden Archive. To comprehend the radical and volatile nature of Carl Jung's work, we have to look closely at a historical mystery that most modern textbooks completely ignore. For years, Jung was the crown prince of psychoanalysis. He was the favorite student and spiritual heir of Sigmund Freud. Freud believed that the human mind was relatively straightforward, a playground of repressed biological urges and early childhood wounds. But Jung felt the persistent, troubling emptiness in Freud's materialist worldview. He sensed that the human soul was far grander, older, and infinitely more mysterious than a mere collection of broken memories and sexual desires. In 1913, Jung made the brave but costly decision to part ways with Freud. In doing so, he lost everything. His colleagues turned their backs on him. The academic establishment labeled him as a mystic and a heretic. Left in absolute isolation, Jung entered a period of profound existential turmoil. In his visions, he began to see rivers of blood washing over Europe, visions that materialized just a year later with the outbreak of the First World War. To discover if he was truly losing his mind or if he was tapping into a collective layer of reality, Jung began a radical and highly unconventional psychological experiment called active imagination. Every night, for a prolonged period, he sat in the dark and forced himself to confront his own inner sub-personalities. He did not suppress them, he engaged them in conversation. He cross-examined them. He recorded these haunting encounters in a large, heavy leather-bound volume, illustrated with intricate paintings. This was the Red Book. It was a journal so raw, labyrinthine, and so deeply intimate that after Jung's death, his family locked it away in a high-security vault. They were absolutely terrified that if the public saw it, Jung's entire scientific reputation would be destroyed. They feared he would be remembered as an eccentric occultist, rather than a pioneer of science. In order to realize this fear, we should realize why the academic establishment has always weaponized the word occultist to try to silence some minds. For centuries, modern science has operated like a strict, dogmatic religion of materialism. If a phenomenon cannot be measured in a laboratory, weighed on a scale, or proven by a precise mathematical formula, these academics declare that it does not exist. They reduced the mystery of human consciousness to mere chemical reactions in the brain. Therefore, anyone who dared to look into the invisible, dark waters of the soul, the mystics, the alchemists, and the occultists, was immediately labeled a heretic. To the rigid academic, the occultist is a threat, because the occultist deals with the untamed, unpredictable elements of life. But Jung recognized that what modern science is only now beginning to grasp. The ancients, the alchemists, and even the occultists were not foolish. They were the world's first psychologists. Long before modern clinics existed, these secret traditions understood that the human psyche was occupied by powerful, invisible forces. They called them demons, gods, or spirits. They developed elaborate rituals, symbols, and myths to communicate with these entities. Rational science mocked these concepts, laughing at the idea of demons, but they missed the point. What the occultists called a demon, modern psychiatry now calls a repressed trauma, a neurosis, or an autonomous psychic splinter. The ancient mystics may not have had our laboratory terminology, but they possessed an astonishingly accurate map of the human underworld. They knew that if you do not respect these internal forces, they will destroy you from the inside out. Jung did not reject science. He expanded it by building a bridge between the clinical mind and the hidden wisdom of the ancient world. Exactly that makes his theories so fascinating. In the depths of the Red Book, he came face to face with this exact vital truth. What we call sanity is just the tip of the iceberg of the human condition. And at the absolute bottom sits a psychological architecture he called the shadow. The hidden self. What exactly is the shadow? Most popular internet videos and self-help books will tell you it is simply your bad side, your anger or your flaws. But this is a shallow explanation that completely misses Jung's nuance. The shadow is not inherently evil. The shadow is everything you have rejected, buried and hidden about yourself in order to be accepted by society. When you were a small child, you were born psychologically whole. You possessed raw aggression, boundless curiosity, intense jealousy, wild creativity, and absolute, naked vulnerability. You were a complete circle, but as you grew up, the world began to perform a reframing of your mind. For example, your parents told you to stop crying and match the expectations of others. Your teachers told you to sit still, remain quiet, and blend in. Your culture taught you which thoughts were respectable and which desires were shameful. To keep being intact and receive love, your ego made a compromise. You split your psyche in half. You created a persona, a polite, stylized mask that you show the world to prove you are a good person that fits in, and everything that did not fit the mask you threw into a dark, locked basement in your subconscious mind. This basement is the shadow. When you locked that door, you didn't just lock away your monsters, you also locked away your power. If a child is naturally very creative, but grows up in a rigid family that views art as a waste of time, that creativity is repressed. It goes into the shadow. Jung called this the golden shadow. By trying so desperately to be perfect, normal, and compliant to others, you inadvertently locked away your raw passion, your personal truth, and your unique genius. You became a safe, predictable half-person, wondering why your life feels so hollow. The mirror of projection. Now, let us look at a psychological phenomenon that operates like an invisible phantom in your daily routine. How does the shadow act when it's locked away? It does not stay quiet in the basement. It accumulates pressure, and it leaks through, a mechanism Jung called projection. Think about the person in your life right now who absolutely, intensely infuriates you. Someone whose behavior makes your blood boil, even if their actions have zero direct impact on your actual life. Jung discovered a sobering truth. You do not see the world as it is, you see the world as who you are. When you have fiercely suppressed a specific trait within yourself, for example, the ability to say no, to be selfish, or to take up space in a room, your subconscious mind cannot tolerate seeing someone else do it freely. Your mind takes your own hidden, locked away desire and projects it onto that other person, like a movie screen. The intense, irrational hatred you feel toward them is actually your own repressed shadow, crying out for expression. You are not angry at their behavior, you are deeply resentful that they are allowing themselves to live the truth you have denied yourself for years. But here comes the interesting part. Projection works the other way too, through the golden shadow. Have you ever put an idol, a celebrity, or a partner on a massive pedestal, believing they possess an unachievable brilliance, charisma, or strength? This too is a projection. Because you are too terrified to step into your own greatness. Because your ego believes you are unworthy, you project your own hidden potential onto them. You worship in someone else what you are too afraid to cultivate in yourself. Every intense admiration and every irrational irritation in your daily life is a secret mirror showing you an exact, uncensored map of your own unhealed soul. The modern transformation. Let us bring Carl Jung's secret map out of the archives and directly into your modern difficulties. How do you actually use this information to free yourself from your psychological prison? Imagine you are sitting in a meeting at work, or standing at a family gathering, and someone says something that triggers a sudden, violent wave of defensiveness in yourself. Your stomach tightens, your face gets warm, and your ego instantly wants to strike back, to judge them, to mock them, or to gossip about them later. In that exact second, you should step into your mind and apply the technique of shadow tracking. Halt the reaction. Do not speak. Do not react. Take a slow, deep breath. Look directly at your anger and ask Jung's golden question. What part of my own hidden self am I seeing in this person? If you hate someone for being ruthless and aggressive, ask yourself, why in my life am I acting like a helpless victim because I am terrified of standing up for myself? If you despise someone for being lazy, ask yourself, why have I chained myself to an exhausting, perfectionist grind because my ego is terrified of resting? This is the modern transformation. Stop being a passive actor played by your triggers. Stop wasting your precious mental energy on judging external events and people, and start using them as great diagnostic tools for your own self-mastery. You take back your projected power, strip the movie screen away, and use the constant friction of the world to rebuild your own wholeness. The Secret Chronicles. To grasp the mind of Carl Jung, we have to look at the bizarre, almost unbelievable events in his private life. Jung was not what we could call a typical cold scientist. He lived on the absolute edge of human reality, experiencing things that would likely drive most people into an asylum. First, from the time he was a small boy, Jung was convinced that he did not have just one personality, but two. He plainly called them personality number 1 and number 2. The first one was the modern social schoolboy, and later the respectable psychiatrist. But number 2 was an ancient, wise old man who lived in the 18th century, a soul that belonged to the dead. Jung spent his entire life balancing these two internal forces, realizing that what we call individuation is just a process of making these two separate entities shake hands. Second, before he even became a psychiatrist, an eerie event of his own home shattered his materialist view of the world. While he was studying in his room, a massive, solid walnut table in the house suddenly split in half with a sound like a pistol shot. Days later, a heavy steel-bred knife inside a locked drawer inexplicably shattered into 4 pieces. We may call it a coincidence, and maybe it was, but nonetheless, these events became the catalyst for his entire medical career. It also led him to discover one of his key concepts, synchronicity, the idea of meaningful coincidences that defy the laws of cause and effect. To prove it, Jung recorded a legendary therapy session with a highly intellectual, rigid female patient. The woman was completely trapped in her rational ego, unable to access her subconscious mind. She was telling Jung about the dream she had the night before, where someone gave her a golden scarab beetle, an ancient Egyptian symbol of rebirth. At that exact second, Jung heard a soft tapping on the window behind him. He turned around, opened the window, and caught the large insect out of the air as it tried to fly into the dark room. It was a scarabine beetle, the closest equivalent to a golden scarab found in Switzerland. Jung handed the insect to the woman and whispered, "Here is your scarab." The absolute shock of that meaningful coincidence shattered her rational defenses. Her subconscious mind broke open, and her true psychological healing began in that exact moment. And finally, Jung realized that to live with his shadow, he had to leave modern civilization behind. He spent years building a stone fortress with his own hands on the shores of Lake Zurich, the Bollingen Tower. It had no electricity, no running water, and no modern heating. Jung chopped his own wood, cooked his own food over an open fire, and painted symbols on the stone walls. He called it a representation of his own psyche in stone. He lived there in absolute isolation, proving that to tame your inner darkness, you must be willing to step out of the loud noise of society and sit with the silence of your own soul. But in my opinion, it has not to be this extreme. One can go, for example, into the dark woods at night and experience the same inner stillness of the soul. The dangerous inflation. But let us look squarely at the severe danger of this process. What happens if you choose to ignore the shadow? Jung warned that the shadow is a living psychological energy, and like any compressed energy, if you seal it tightly and ignore the pressure, it will eventually explode. In deep psychiatry, this is known as shadow possession. Have you ever seen a person who is normally perfectly calm, polite, and gentle suddenly explode into a monstrous, uncontrollable rage over a tiny, insignificant inconvenience? You are witnessing shadow possession. The conscious mask is cracked under pressure, and the starved, angry monster in the basement has broken the chains and taken the wheel of the entire personality. The person literally becomes possessed by what they denied. It is the equivalent of the story arc becoming what you swore to destroy. But Jung saw an even greater horror. He witnessed how entire nations, infected by collective fear, could project their shared shadow onto a minority, an enemy state, or a dissenting group. When a society becomes obsessed with its own pure righteousness, it creates a collective shadow. We see this today in the digital landscape of the internet, in the vicious modern culture of public shaming, hyper-moral tribalism, and the endless search for scapegoats. The trap is thinking that your side is purely good and the other side is purely evil. The more moral, holy, and perfect a society pretends to be on the outside, the more black, twisted, and violent its shadow becomes in the dark. A fortress built on artificial goodness is the most unstable, explosive structure in human psychology, integrating the dark. Carl Jung famously wrote this sentence: "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." True psychological maturity, true spiritual nobility, is not about destroying your inner demons. It is about having the astonishing courage to sit down with them, look them in the eye, listen to their grief, and integrate them into your whole being. Your anger, when left in the dark, becomes a toxic poison that destroys your relationships, but that exact same anger, when brought into the light and integrated, becomes the fierce, healthy boundary that stops people from treating you poorly. Your aggression, when hidden, turns into passive-aggressive resentment, but when integrated, it transforms into the raw drive, passion, and unshakable focus you need to build your authentic life. Drop the exhausting, heavy act of artificial perfection. Stop lying to your own mirror. Accept that you are a complex, ancient, and beautifully chaotic mix of light and shadow. You do not need to be a one-sided goodness. You just need to be whole. Thank you for spending this hour with Nocturnal Clarity and our series, Architects of the Soul. If this deep journey into the subconscious brought you a moment of genuine perspective, consider liking and subscribing, as it helps to let this community grow. Thank you for listening.